Howdy, folks, and welcome to the wildest review in the wilderness. Was that too much? Maybe that was too much. Each week we go deep into the Disney Plus catalog and pull out a little nugget that you might have overlooked. And we'll tell you if it's Disney Plus or Disney Minus. This week we're taking on our first Western, The Apple Dumpling Gang. Set in the Old West around the time of the gold rush in 1879, it's a story about three poor orphans who are left with a gambler named Russell Donovan, played by Bill Bixby. The kids discover they've actually inherited a large gold mine from their father, and they find some gold, and soon a series of greedy undesirables step up to claim it for their own. The kids turn to a lovable outlaw duo, Theodore, played by Don Knotts, and Amos, played by Tim Conway, and of course wackiness ensues. This movie is classic Disney, but is it worth your time? We're here to give you that answer and more. So saddle up, partner, as we take you deep in the plus. Hey guys, this week I have another special guest with me, Dave Smith, and we're going to talk about the movie The Apple Dumpling Gang. And Dave, you picked this one on a list, and then I helped you narrow it down. But what was your thinking in picking this one?
Hey Rob, nice to be here. So this is one of those movies that I remember seeing as a kid, and I remember it at the time just being absolutely hilarious. So I thought, I haven't seen it in 30 years now, so let's give it a shot and see if it still holds up, or if, as I suspected, my youthful sense of humor was significantly different than it was now.
Well, yeah, so the thing that strikes me about this movie is that when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, Apple Dumpling Gang, I love that movie. I've seen it before. And then I sat and watched it and I went, have I? Have I watched this before?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that really threw me, though, is like when you see the art on the cover of it and you see the billing, it's usually Don Knotts and Tim Conway in, the Apple Dumpling Gang. And I'm just looking at it going, why were they on the front of this? Because Bill Bixby gets top billing. And then he's like, it's mostly about him and the kids. And these guys just kind of lumber in here and there, and obviously the comic relief. But when you look at the cover of the movie or movie posters, it always makes it seem like it's their movie. And I think that's the part that shocked me the most.
It's true. And what surprised me was that I remember them being the focus of the movie. For some reason, I don't know if it's just because they're so good in every scene they're in, but it felt to me like, thinking back, that they were the whole movie. But
Yeah.
obviously watching it now, they're barely in this thing until probably the last 20 minutes. I mean, they have scenes certainly, and they do their thing, but yeah, it really is Bill Bixby and Susan Clark and the kids, and the town characters, and then there's these little interstitials with Conway and Knotts, but really, I was shocked at how little they were used for this movie.
Yeah, it's like a B story, actually. Their role in it
Right.
is like a B story. And maybe the thought that I had was maybe I watched The Return of the Apple Dumpling Gang, because I think that is the sequel that came out. I think that's more about them, but I actually didn't have at the time the heart to go back and watch that one too
Right.
before this. But I mean, I think maybe that must be the one that I remember, because when watching this one, it just didn't seem very familiar at all. So. And then here's the thing that bothered me, and I don't know if it bothered you as well, but I grew up on MASH, and I grew up on the Andy Griffith Show. So when I'm watching this show, and the Incredible Hulk, so when I'm watching the show, I'm like, that's not this character, that's Barney Fife, that's Colonel Potter. And so I found it hard to break out of that because I know those characters or those actors so well from their famous characters. Did you have that problem too?
I did a little bit, yes. It felt like a bunch of famous people had gotten together and did just, threw a production together really quick. And, I think what surprised me watching it this time was I didn't watch MASH when I had watched it the first time, but Harry Morgan, to see him in this definitely made me think, wait a second, that's Colonel Potter. And thinking back to it as I watched it this time, I thought he did an absolutely outstanding job with that character. I enjoyed seeing him on the screen in this story. I thought his lines were funny. The way he acted them was, brought a level of humor to it. So I enjoyed seeing him in this, but it definitely did take me out of the story. Tim and the others, and Don Knotts. Anytime I see him, the automatic reaction is to think back to the Andy Griffith Show. I mean, that is just his iconic role, and it is a little weird to see him outside of that. Although And I do want to talk about this a little bit in a little bit, but pairing him with Tim Conway, I thought was a genius move. Not something that I would have expected to happen just based on their comedy stylings, but I thought it worked really well. Perhaps not as much in this one, but certainly in later films. As we get into Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again, as we get into Private Eyes, those other movies where they're together. It really was a lot of fun seeing those. So it was good seeing them together for the first time.
Okay, so actually, you bring up a point that I wanted to make is you talk about them together and that being an interesting pairing. My thing is that I always felt like Tim Conway and Don Knotts' style of comedy or comedic acting was very similar. And
Yeah,
so it's like
exactly.
in this particular movie anyway, Don Knotts actually plays the straight man, which I'm not used to seeing because he's usually the bumbling sidekick, whereas in this one, he actually had to be the smart one, and Tim Conway was the bumbling sidekick. And I think Tim Conway as the bumbling sidekick was awesome. But I guess I expected them to be basically two sidekicks, and Don Knotts is really, to me at least, based on the things that I've seen him in, he's a little bit of a different character in this one, and I think probably out of necessity.
It was out of necessity, and I definitely see your point. The reason that I liked it was because they are so similar. They built a career playing kind of the confused, not quite that smart everyman, and what this forced Don Knotts to do was to change into the role more of you know, the person who is not quite as smart as he thinks he is. So a little bit different take on the role for Don Knotts. So I like seeing him in that, and I thought that interaction between the two of them worked pretty well. I think they refined it through several movies, but in this particular movie, I thought it worked pretty well. I mean, I wasn't put off by the fact that they are very similar actors and styles with their acting.
Right. And here's a thing about just this movie in general is that it is a Western. And I feel like I have sort of a love like maybe hate relationship with Westerns because
Right.
Westerns always feel so long to me. And I don't know why that is. This wasn't a particularly long movie. It's about an hour and a half. But it felt a lot longer to me for some reason. I don't know if it's just because it's an older movie, it was a little slower. But when I think about Westerns, I actually love the Western Silverado. And it's got this same kind of vibe where it's like it's a Western, but it's also a little bit comedic, and it's got a little bit of heart to it. So, to me, it felt a little bit like that. But, when I look at Westerns, like even like modern Westerns, like Young Guns, I feel they feel long and kind of drawn out. And so I like the idea of a Western, like even The Lone Ranger, I mean, was a Western, but there's just something about it that feels like it's just kind of slow.
I see that. I mean, I also feel that way about Westerns. I'm not a huge fan of them. I think part of it is that Westerns have to spend so much time in establishing the atmosphere and establishing the landscape, and the landscape becomes part of that Western character that it slows down the progression of the plot a little bit. This one didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. It spent a little bit, but there was some interesting pacing throughout this movie. I mean, it felt like it jumped immediately into the plot and got to the kids arriving in town, and then it felt like it stalled out for a little bit, and just it was focused on the kids, which I didn't feel like they had a whole lot of personality. There was maybe two traits between the three of them, and then it picked back up, and we got into the theft of the gold nugget with Don Knotts and Tim Conway, and that was almost like a set piece, just a sketch of them. They're doing a sketch of a set piece. And then the shootout lasts I felt like it was forever. I mean, that thing just kept going and going. They kept shooting. I mean, I don't know whether that was purposely done in like a Blazing Saddle style to just show the ridiculousness of a shootout going that long, or if there was really just a bad pacing of the movie itself.
Okay, so first of all, before we leave the shootout, there was something that I actually read about ahead of time and then watched, and it kind of made me smile a little bit. Is I'm looking every time I watch a movie, I'm looking for Easter eggs, I'm looking for hidden things, I'm looking for nods to other movies, and in this one, apparently Harry Morgan filmed this around the same time as he started his stint on MASH, and so
Right.
on MASH, his character was married, and his wife's name was Mildred, and he talked about Mildred all the time. In this movie, in the shootout, as he's about to get into it, he looks at this woman with a shotgun and says, "Cover me, Mildred, I'm going in." And so I don't know. I mean, that can't not be on purpose, especially since they were being filmed at the same time, right?
I remember that line. I didn't catch it. I didn't make that connection, but that would be pretty cool if it was an intentional thing.
Yeah. So back to like the kids. I think that this is a weird, and I don't know how you feel about this. I feel like there was a weird mix of acting ability in this. I think Bill Bixby was amazing. Obviously, he was a seasoned actor by the time this came around. It was 1975. He'd done Courtship of Eddie's Father and just a huge laundry list of things that he had done, and he was just really good. Don Knotts and Tim Conway played their part really well, but some of the other acting just seemed a little hard to handle. Harry Morgan was good, and I think he played the role well, but again, it seemed a lot like, Colonel Potter in town, like in a Western town. Exactly. Right. So, but when it comes to the kids, Celia, the little girl that played Celia, which this is literally the only thing she ever did. She did this and she was like, I'm out. She never did another thing again. It was just, I mean, they're kids, but when I watch today's shows and like shows with kids in them, kids can be really good actors. This one, it kind of, it kind of took me out of it a little bit.
Yeah. And I was surprised because, for some reason in my mind, I thought that Disney Studio had a really good handle on, molding and directing child actors and getting their performances to a place where they should be. It didn't feel like they spent a lot of time on the kids in this. They were there. They were almost more of a prop than characters within the movie.
Yeah, she was no Bobby Driscoll, is what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
So one of the other kids, Clovis, that whole thing about Clovis don't like to be touched.
I get it.
Exactly. It was funny.
Right.
And to me, that was sort of like a funny takeaway line. We're kind of saying it around the house now. Clovis don't like to be touched. But that Clovis didn't really have much else going on in this movie, other than that. So, I think it was kind of weird to me too that the kids are, like, spoiler, right? The kids are the Apple Dumpling Gang, and I get that they kind of set that up by saying the kids always asking for apple dumplings and can we have all the apple dumplings we can eat, and then they get named the Apple Dumpling Gang. But again, in my head, that was Tim Conway and Don Knotts, and I don't know why I ever thought that, but it's just funny that they're not the Apple Dumpling Gang, and they're on the cover, and they're not the stars of this show. And again, that's just that whole thing. I just keep coming back to that.
They really low-keyed the name of the gang. I mean, for it being the title of the film, it was almost a throwaway. You could go through the film and not realizing that was the name of it if you had seen it without knowing the name of the film, really.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Again, acting. Let's talk about Slim Pickens for a second. This guy, first of all, great name, right. Like no doubt. But he was a very famous actor, a Western actor, I believe, and he was very unique. He has a very unique voice. So it was interesting to see him in this, and it almost felt like he was almost Western royalty in this movie, and so when I saw him, I was like, I feel like I've heard his voice in other Disney movies, and I didn't see him in any of the animated movies, unless you know something that I don't. But I did find that he was the voice of Bob in The Black Hole, the beat-up old robot that is Vincent's like cousin. And I just thought that was kind of cool. I think that was probably one of the last roles that he played and for Disney. But I didn't find anything else that he had been in with Disney, but it was just interesting to see him in this movie.
It was. I felt like he was a little bit underused. I would have liked to have seen him do more. I would have liked to have seen the whole Stillwell gang show up a little bit more, maybe even show up a little bit earlier in this. I felt, understanding they had to keep their G rating, there just wasn't a lot. It didn't feel like they were a competent gang either. So there was nothing to establish their ruthlessness or their, what their skills are and why they were feared. It just, I would have liked to have seen that used a little bit more.
By the way, the Apple Dumpling Gang song that opens and closes the show, how did you feel about that one?
I liked it. I always like songs that are very specific to the plot of the movie. So I wasn't giving it a close listen, so if there's an issue in there, I will take
No,
back what I said. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
no, no, no. There was no issue. I just thought it was very entertaining and very
Right,
much of the time. It sounds like a bard type of a thing,
right.
like a minstrel telling the story of what's about to come and then what has happened. I just things like that I think are pretty neat because in Disney it's always been sort of about the music, right? I mean, when we look back at some of the movies like Mary Poppins or some of the current day stuff like Frozen, it's so much about the music, and so the fact that they had this song in there and it's specific to this and the fact that I'm not sure I've ever heard it, which, as many Disney
I
things that
don't
I've been
remember it at
to, you
all.
would think
Right.
that maybe they might have pulled this gem out, because I don't think there's anything offensive about it. I just think it's kind of funny. But it's definitely, if you heard the song, it's got the Apple Dumpling Gang in the title and they tell the story, so you know what it was.
Right. It almost feels like a TV show theme song from that
Yes,
era. Right.
mind blown. Exactly. That's exactly what it sounds like.
The Susan Clark role,
Mhm.
Dusty Clydesdale, Magnolia Dusty Clydesdale. I thought it was interesting. I was actually kind of pleased with it at first because it really did take on a little bit more. It was very, how do I say this? It was less gender role specific than I would have expected for the time period.
Okay.
They set her up as someone who is, definitely an independent woman, someone who is strong, who wanted to do her own thing, who wasn't interested in just finding a man and getting married. She was really running her father's business. So the start of the film I thought was good, but then by the end they had her revert right back into that stereotypical woman's role in the West, and so I was disappointed to see that.
You mean at the end where they put her in the pretty dress and she rolls off into the
Pretty
sunset?
dress, she rolls off to the sunset. She's not going to run the business. She's going to stay at home, take care of the kids, and let Bill Bixby do what he wants. Now she does have a line there that indicates that she's not just going to sit at home all the time, but I would have rather have liked her kind of keep her personality even after getting with Donovan.
So one other thing that I notice about this movie, and it's 2020, it's not 1975. The production of some of the stunts, some of the green screen effects, some of the matte paintings that they did, just felt a little maybe not as high quality as I think they really had the ability to do in 1975.
It was. If you look at the list of movies that Disney released in 75, it doesn't feel like it was the number one production on the lot. It was probably second or third. Um, and I think it shows in some of the technical aspects of the film. They definitely tried to keep the budget down, but it's. I was surprised to learn when looking at the box office for 75 that it was in the top 10.
Hmm.
So, in the year of Jaws, it wasn't near Jaws numbers, but it made over $30 million domestically. So it was the only movie that Disney had in the top 25. So it was an important movie for the studio. You're looking at a studio that's in transition. It's moving out of animation. It's deep into its live action period, but they haven't had a hit in a while.
Right.
And it would be years after this before they really had another hit. So the fact that it did that well at the box office really kind of helped the studio out and gave them a little bit of breathing room as they continued through the rest of the 70s.
Well, in particular, the scene where the stagecoach, or I guess it's a fire truck that goes off the ledge into the water with Bill Bixby and Slim Pickens on it. They show it up close, and when they show it far away coming into the water, it clearly looks like it's two mannequins that are
Too,
like
yes.
tied into this thing as it falls in. Not that it needed to be perfect, but some of the stuff, and it felt like when she was riding the horse, it definitely looked like it was a male stuntman riding the horse. Just little things like that I just look at and go, maybe nitpick a little bit more than I should because of the time. But, Star Wars was 1977, and I feel like they had some pretty quality effects for a movie that was done on a shoestring budget. So it feels like that in 75 they could have done a little better.
Yeah, there wasn't the attention to detail, and I don't think they intended it to be anything more than just, a quick film that'll be in the theaters for a couple weeks and then out.
Tell me this, is it a family movie? Is it a comedy? Is it a Western? Or is it all three?
It is it it's all three, but it's little pieces of each of those. So the comedy is, there are parts that are funny, but nothing that's like outrageously funny. I don't think Don Knotts and Tim Conway really hit their stride until later movies. There are definitely Western elements to it, but it's by no means a shining example of the genre. And it's a family movie because there are kids, and I think kids do identify with it. I certainly did as a kid. I really liked it, but I don't think the sum of those parts add up to one complete great movie.
Okay, Dave. So here's the big question: would you recommend this movie?
Um, I wouldn't. No, probably not. I wouldn't say don't see it, but I would say spend your time, go see Rides Again. I think that's probably a funnier film and probably more in line with what you'd expect for a Disney film. And you can bypass this one. But if you're interested in seeing Conway and Knotts in their first film together, then by all means see it.
And you said bypass again because I have not watched Rides Again in a long time. Do you think it's necessary to watch this one to then know what's going on in the second one?
I don't think so. I think it's much sillier. There's much more comedic elements. It's just that is a pure comedy film, and you don't need to know the backstory other than these characters exist.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think for me, I think if you're a Disney like hardcore Disney fan, I think you need to watch it because I think it's part of Disney history. But at the same time, I don't think it's a great movie. So I think if you're not a hardcore Disney fan or just you're getting to the end of Disney Plus and you're running out of stuff to watch, but I think I'm with you on this one. I think I would have a hard time looking at somebody who is not a Disney fan and saying, oh, you know what you need to watch. You need to watch the Apple Dumpling Gang because you will thank me for it. So I think I agree with you. I think this is one that, unless you're a hardcore fan, that you could probably pass on.
That's fair.
And if you disagree with any of this or agree, let us know in the comments below. And Dave, thank you for pitching in on this one. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, Dave, so you've prepared a pick of the week. For your pick of the week, what do you like this week?
So my pick of the week was a short from 1933, The Three Little Pigs. So this was released under the Silly Symphony header. It was one of the first color animated shorts. It was not the first one by any means. It's not Tree and Flowers, but it was really one that in some ways helped the studio transition from one phase to another. First of all, the story itself, it's cute. The pigs are cute. The song is nice. It has the Big Bad Wolf song in it. So, it's something that is remembered in culture even to today. But just beyond that, the reason I chose it because like Apple Dumpling Gang, which was a film in the middle of the studio transitioning from one phase to another, Three Little Pigs enabled it to transition from black and white Mickey Mouse films. They hadn't gotten to the point of merchandising Mickey Mouse and getting that income. They weren't sure where to go next after Mickey Mouse, and they just started doing color. So Three Little Pigs was the short that they released, and it blew up. I mean, it made more than 10 times what the budget was. So, back in 1933, it made over $250,000. This is an animated short, made $250,000 on its release. So, it was successful with the audiences, and it really helped the studio progress. Now, what also is interesting about this particular short is that there were sequels to it. So there were a couple of other sequels set in this, I'll call it the universe of the Three Little Pigs, that didn't do well. And why I find that interesting, because it was those sequels, when they didn't do well, that really caused Walt Disney, to want to not just keep doing the same thing over and over again. That's what caused them to basically make the statement that they needed to do something new in order to really thrive as a studio. And so that led them down the path of looking at feature animation. It led them down the path of Snow White. And then everything that the Disney animated studio would become after that was really a result of this short being successful, its sequels not being successful. But this short itself plays an important role within the Disney company history. And it looks great. When I watched it, a couple of days ago, I was surprised. 1933, it still got a little bit of that bouncy animation to it, but it looks spectacular. I'm sure they've remastered it, but I was surprised that it was a 1933 film. It looks like it was done much later. I mean, you could almost post Snow White with how good it looks.
Cool. So let me ask you, have you ever had your picture taken with the three little pigs in the parks?
I have not. I've
What?
not run into them. Wolf, yes. Big Bad Wolf, yes. But the pigs, I have not.
Nice. Okay. I love the fact that there is a Three Little Pigs universe, kind of like the first Marvel universe kind
That's
of a
right.
thing. So that leads me into my pick of the week, and my pick of the week is the Expanding the Universe special, which is on Disney Plus, and is basically it's a recap of everything that they announced for Marvel on Disney Plus at Comic-Con and at the D23 Expo this year, or last year. So it was really neat to kind of see it because they have this kind of startup sizzle reel, and I'm a sucker for a Disney sizzle reel every single time. And then they kind of go through all the stuff that they introduced about these shows. They show, the actors they brought on stage, the things they said about it. They show a little bit of the behind the scenes of what it's going to be, and they kind of walk you through it. So if you're not somebody like me, or probably like you, that has sat down and kind of seen what things are coming up for Disney Plus for Marvel, it was really a cool recap of what we can expect. End of 2020 is when it starts with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then WandaVision, and moves on from there. But there's a lot of cool stuff coming. And at the end, they kind of give this recap of, hey, here are the things that you can watch right now on Disney Plus. And one of the things that strikes me about that is there are still some of the Marvel movies that are not available on Disney Plus. Not just the Hulk, which is still owned by Universal, and not just the two Spider-Man movies that are still owned by Sony, but there are a couple other movies that haven't cleared rights yet from, I assume, Netflix or something like that. And so it's interesting that if you wanted to sit down right now and watch the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe on Disney Plus, you actually can't. So you may have to borrow a movie or a Netflix password from somebody if you had to cancel Netflix to get Disney Plus. But it's really neat. It's only 12 minutes. It's very quick. But to me, as a huge Marvel movie fan, it gets me all pumped up for these specials that are coming down the pike. So I'm really excited about that.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.